Welcome to episode 2 of season 5 of Performing the Arts. My name, as always, is Brian M. Davis. Joining me today is an actress, activist, uh, what have you. Her name is Cortney Palm. You might know the name from various movies such as Sushi Girl, uh, Zombievers, Silent Night, uh, Death House, and probably other films that I probably can't think of off the top of my head, but you probably can. So, Miss Palm, how did you get?
Hi.
Hi, how did you get into acting?
Well, first, thanks for having me, and thanks everybody for tuning in and watching. A lot of you know this, some of you don't, but I grew up in Colorado, which isn't a great opportunity for people who want to do film or theater. And I played with Barbies until I was like 16 years old. And I think that's what made me feel comfortable moving into a world there that was involved with storytelling and making things up and playing make believe. And my mom and I did these like crazy John Robert Powers kind of things here in Denver, which was like a huge scam, spent thousands of money on trying to make it as an actor in Denver. It was just like, I hope no one does that. So if anyone's ever heard of that place, just walk away. No agent should be taking money from you unless you're making money. A lot of
Yeah.
things I learned. But yeah, so I went to LA when I was 18 to go to school. And that's when I went for theater. So I got my BA in theater, and then I started transitioning into short films and the film industry there through just networking, really.
Hmm.
I mean, it's hard.
Yeah, it is hard to try and transition from film, I mean, to theater into film. I mean, I've done it a couple of times, and it's quite, I don't want to say quite easy, but it's difficult because one, I do have that theater mindset where it's just like I do miss being in behind the scenes, that sort of thing too. But when I'm on a film set, it's very fun because you get to do a lot of stuff with the span of a day, and sometimes that could be like, oh, it's just like maybe one or two scenes, or it could be either, or depending on how fast the director is, like 5 scenes within the whole day, and it just depends on the amount of scheduling
Yeah.
you have as both an actor or as a production artist. Uh, in terms of your BA, did you have like what was it like studying at your college?
It was fun. It was a really small college. It was in Thousand Oaks, California. And what's great about being in a small university is you actually get to be a lead actor in any of the plays. In other universities like UCLA or Pepperdine, you know, I auditioned there and I went to I toured there, and they were just like, you know, it's really difficult to get a part in a theater program, you know, until you're a junior, senior. And when you're at a smaller university, you're able to act right away. And that's what I loved about it. So, I mean, I learned the only thing I didn't like is all my teachers they were tenured in, they were very set in their ways. They did the
Yeah.
same tired things over and over again. And it's like, can we need some fresh blood? We need to like pick up the pace. We need to change some things. And there were times we did some pretty big musicals that we rented out a big theater for. And I don't sing, so I was always backstage for those. So it was really fun doing the quick changes or any quick makeup changes for the actors. Like I remember one actor split his pants, so we had to like sew it really quick, and we're like running on stage with him, like hiding behind him, sewing him as he's, you know, in the scene. And I love things like that too. You know, I think as an actor, you should play with multiple hats. Like you should try
Yeah.
producing, you should try writing, you should be backstage sometimes. You know, you should understand like the craft in its whole, both theater and film, because then you understand and respect everyone for their roles that they play. You know, when I was a background member, like I remember like big time actors treating me like I was crap. I actually had an assistant director look at me when I was in background in one of his films. He was looking at me and he was just like so rude to me. And then later he ended up being an assistant director on a big movie that I was the lead in. And I was like, hey, dude, do you remember me? You were really rude to me. Like, you know, you always should, I think, honor and respect everybody,
Yeah.
because without them, they wouldn't have what you have in the end. So yeah, that was fun being backstage. And I don't know, theater, I love theater because you get like that immediate response from the audience. You know,
Oh
you get
yeah.
that laugh or the applause or like the woo, and it's really exciting. But film, you only get to be with the cameraman, like you and either the camera operator, the DP, and it's just you two together sometimes, like in the most important moment of the film. And that's who you're acting to. You're acting to that truth in the lens. And you don't get that, like what you receive from an audience. So it's crazy the difference between the two. So, like you said, transitioning from one to the other, I know casting directors are like, oh, you're just theater, or oh, you're just film. Like you don't know how to stage act, you don't know how to film act. It's like, I don't know. People are very close-minded, narrow-minded.
Yeah, I had the same exact thought because at Brooklyn College, even though it is a esteemed college, and it is an esteemed college and has a great theater department and film department, but at the same time, they would be very, I wouldn't say close, well, they would be close-minded in terms of like getting people on roles because, they have essentially two programs. At the BFA program, which is more or less, hey, it's more or less a conservatory at the school where it's like they have X amount of actors for at least a couple of years, like maybe 8 actors, and then by the time they're done, they do essentially either one show a semester. Like the way I heard about it was essentially BFA program actors. They had more or less the top billing. So if they were going to be doing, say, something like Streetcar Named Desire, one of them has got to be playing Blanche, and probably a BFA, another BFA actor will probably be playing like another supporting character, that sort of thing. So
Mm,
it's definitely one of those things where it's just like they are there is fresh blood in this theater community, especially in New York, but there are people who are still like in the notion of the old ways, where it's just like uh, they want to have essentially brand value. It's like a great example is um, even though it closed down because of the pandemic, Beetlejuice was one of those shows that was essentially a struggling musical, right? But at the same time, it had a lot of great fan base. It was like one of those fresh new ideas, right?
mm,
The people behind the I forgot who it is. I think it was a super company, but the people behind the theater, the Winter Garden Theater, they were like, it's not bringing up a good revenue, all that stuff. So what they basically did was, they closed down. They said, okay, you have until June to shut down completely, i.e., close out the show, and then by the time it's September, we gotta do musical man. We gotta do Music Man with Hugh Jackman, and that's probably got to bring in a lot of revenue. So yeah, and
mm,
I've seen the same thing happen with film too. Is like there are great ideas. This is some of these IDs ideas are not really well known because they are a lot of film. Like they aren't really like no. It's like when people think of film, it's like, oh, I want to be like the next Tarantino or the next Spielberg or such and such, right?
mm,
So it's definitely one of those things where it's just like you see talented people, but sometimes those talented people are kind of like not really. Uh, they're kind of like not really noticed that well. It's like what you just said before, where it's just like I work with talented people behind the scenes, both on stage in theater, but also in film as well. And they're not, and people are like, yeah, I don't really see myself as an actor, or I don't see myself as a film person, but I still want to work with them in the future because they still have that eye for talent. So yeah,
mm.
and I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but yeah, it's definitely one of those things where it's just like you definitely do see a lot more talent on an independent film rather than something on a very big budgeted thing where it's just like very formulaic, strip it,
Mm.
it's like you know, and sometimes when they do bring someone who is a independent, like an independent filmmaker and all that stuff, and they have them do a big budgeted movie thing, 9 times out of 10, it could work, but there is that one time where it's like they're the fan base of that one thing that doesn't really like it. So it's very difficult to talk about, what is fresh and what is fresh when there's a lot of people who are still with that older mindset of like they want to keep everything still to that. I'd rather just have it as that. So yeah.
Mhm.
But you mentioned LA, and I feel like LA has always been one of those things that has always been like talked about, but really hasn't been experienced. Because I've had friends that's like, Brian, you need to go to LA for a week, be LA for a week, actually be on auditions, not like these New York auditions where it's just like, oh, they just see you for like 5 minutes and you leave, and then you just walk wherever in New York City. What is it like in LA? Because I know it's like LA is like a whole different beast. So what is it like in LA in terms of not only auditioning but also just like film in general?
LA is crazy. Like it's definitely. I mean, I've only been to New York a few times for a film premiere of mine, two film premieres of mine, and I spoke with some locals there, and it is a different world. LA is sort of segregated in ways that like Hollywood is mostly film. Downtown LA is mostly modeling, print work for like auditions, and
Yeah.
then like let's say towards the west coast, like let's say Santa Monica area, Beverly Hills, you get some film auditions there, mostly commercial, mostly print, mostly modeling. So really you go to the studios that are in Studio City or Hollywood, and all over Manhattan Beach. So there's all these studios that you can go to audition, and then there's like these independent little areas that you can audition at as well. um, but I mean, you could be in someone's apartment auditioning. You could be at a big studio lot auditioning. HBO has its own little area. So there's all these, it's so separated and so segregated. So it's like, it's just if you, I guess not segregated for like, but like it's separated by highways,
Yeah.
time. So if you want to go to an audition, in New York, you're probably taking a train, but when you're in LA, you're sitting in hours of traffic. You get ready for an audition, and then you sit in 3 hours of traffic till you get there. It's
Yeah.
crazy. And then you get there, everyone looks like you, obviously, and you're just sitting there, and you're in and out super fast. And if you're lucky enough, you can make a connection with certain casting directors, and they'll call you in and actually give you time, and you're in the room for more time. They give you direction, you can change it up, or do something different with them. But if they don't really know who you are, they don't really care, they don't give you the time of day. And half the time you're not even meeting with the head casting director anyway, you're meeting with their assistant, and their assistant doesn't care. Like honestly, it's crazy. I don't want to say this if any casting director ends up watching this, but like it really does feel like they're just, I know the names I want, those are the names that I'm going to give time to. The names I don't know are going to come in, and I'll just humor them. Or I'm just like, okay, whatever, you're done. Like it feels really um bare. Like there's no connection there. It just feels weird. But when you're auditioning, let's say for like independent films, that's when I have the most fun. That's when directors and producers actually give a shit. That's when they
Yeah.
actually like take time with you, and you actually can do the job that you're there to do. You actually feel human. You feel like an artist. You actually produce your best work. I mean, when I auditioned for some really big roles at these big studios, I just felt like I had no soul. And same with commercial auditions. I just felt weird. Like I didn't feel like there was like this love for the craft. And that's why I also love theater auditions, because you're on the stage and you're in that realm that you're comfortable in, and they give you an allotted amount of time. You actually get your time, and so I appreciate that. So it is weird. It is a weird animal there. I
Yeah.
know that everything's all self tape. right now, at least for me. So it's a little easier because then you can like redo it a bunch of times if you're not happy, but then you get in your head, so you're not really prepared. But yeah,
Yeah,
LA's
it, it's weird because sorry to cut you off, but it's weird. Okay, it's weird because previously I've had help people in the past self tape, and this was like way before the pandemic really hit, and it's like it's weird because self taping is like, oh, it's like it's you're there, someone's reading the thing for your that sort of thing, as opposed to being in an audition room where it's like almost the same thing, but it's like it's weird because it's like what you just said before. You're kind of like eyeing for the same part, but it's like, and you're kind of like almost similarity to a few other people. It's like maybe it's like turn to your little right. There's like someone who like looks like someone else, but oddly looks like you. So it's like it's like weird like that. But when you're doing a self taping, it's like much more calm, much more relaxed. Like you have you're in your own element. So
mm-hmm.
weird how a couple of years ago, where it's like, oh, it's self taping was just like one of those things where it's like, yeah, it's just like one of those things where an actor has a lot of time on their hands, but the casting director probably doesn't have enough time to do an actual audition in front of people. So there's like, hey, just send me a self tape, that sort of thing. I could easily just go like, okay, these tapes were good. Yeah, I'll just send these side maybe, and then
Yeah, well, that's the hard part because when you do a tape, sometimes they can just be like right away they see your face and they say no. So you even get an opportunity to show yourself when it's a self tape because then they can just click off right away.
yeah,
And one of my friends who's a little bit more well known than I am, she told me that there are like different tiers for auditions, and sometimes there'll be this upper tier for the people who are more well known, who will obviously have more of a chance. And even above them are the people who already got offers. Those people who got offers, then the upper tier, then I come in, then other people come in. So it's sort of like this, where are you on this spectrum? Where, how big of a name are you? Do you have the right look? Kind of thing. And if you don't even have that, the casting director's not going to give you the time of day. And I'll
yeah,
actually go into film auditions. Like I remember auditioning for, I think it was an HBO show, and I walked in and there was headshots all on the wall. And there was a headshot, and underneath her name was the character name that I was auditioning for. And I was like, she either got the part or she's their offer. But I walk in there and I see it right away, and I'm like, oh shit! And now I have to audition. Like I feel worthless. So like you said, when you just do a self-tape at home, you don't have the inhibitions, you don't have those like feelings of limitation, you don't have that self-doubt because you've seen other pretty girls in the room or well-known girls in the room that from shows that you watch, and or their freaking picture on the wall. So it's self-tapes are a little bit more fun that way, but then again, are they even watching
yeah.
it? With COVID, I think they are.
I mean, I think as a casting director, and I've done casting director for like my own little for like producing my plays and stuff like that. It, it's fun to watch and interact with people who are essentially who I've dealt with people who aren't really trained actors who actually do give a good read and stuff like that too, and actually do take direction. So I'm like, okay, they may be good in the future, even if they aren't like a trained actress or an actor. They know how to, they know how to read a script, and they know how to like at least say the lines correctly, that sort of thing too. And as casting director, it's still hard to do because it's like you know you could be seeing at least maybe 20 people that day, and then there's like, okay, I have to take at least two of these 20 people, and it's like very hard because it's like at the end of the day, it's like the same thing. It's like with it's like you have these art what's it called headshots, and you just go into the headshots and you're just trying to go by memory. It's like, did this person give me good performance on all that stuff? Did this person give a good performance? It's it it's weird how essentially casting directors, they're the ones who essentially are essentially creating the movie by getting that cast ready. But at the same time, it's I want to say it's a little stressful job because they're essentially they're essentially they're essentially the blueprint to what of the people who are going to be going onto the films. Like, and of course, there are other people who was like what you mentioned before is like that upper tier of that. Oh, is like, oh, he's in this. Oh, he's in this. Okay, or he's
Mhm.
that sort of thing too. And then there's that little midway of people like people who are kind of like used to like all this stuff, and then there are people who are like very new to this stuff.
Mhm.
People who are new to this stuff, they really don't understand the process of all that stuff. They just figured, oh, it's like go into this thing and then get my headshot taken and then
Yeah.
go to do all that stuff. It's weird. It's like I remember what was it? 8 or so years ago, The Dark Knight Rises was being filmed in New York City. Right, it was a big thing. I went to do a one of those like one day, one day, like we just said before, be a background actor, right?
Mhm.
I knew how this all worked, and I didn't get a call back. The only thing I heard a call back was when HBO was doing some other show at the time, and it was like, "Hey, we need actors." I'm like, "Do you want to do it?" I'm like, I didn't even know what they were talking about. So again, I still, there are still people who are new to this who really don't understand like the that business side of casting, especially on the casting side, especially on audition side too.
Mhm.
There are people who are just like kind of used to it, and they're like, right, and it's like, will today be the day where like, will they finally say, okay, what, we'll finally say, you know what, we don't want to use this actor. Let's just try something new.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you want them to say that ideally, but it's just, I've seen on the other side of it how much I'm worth, and I'm not worth enough money for some films. So I have some casting director friends who are like, Courtney, I loved you, you were great. They loved you, you were great, but you're not pulling in enough money. So unfortunately, I have to pull in this actor and this actor and this actor. He's like, that's not my choice of actors, but they pull in more money. They have a
Yeah,
better name, and I was just like, okay, I understand, So it works sort of for me for the horror films because I have more of a pull there.
yeah,
So I understand when it comes to other films or TV when it comes down to that. Like I have a friend too who's a really talented stunt actress, and she's been turned down by agent or casting directors and producers all the time because they see her as a stunt performer, not as like the lead actress.
yeah,
And she's so good. She's really talented. So it's really frustrating to see that. It's just like, well, how can we shift this paradigm? How can we make this different? But it's, you see Will Smith, you're going to grab Will Smith. You're not going to
yeah,
grab the no-name actor who just came out of, you know, wherever and is an amazing actor. You're not going to pick him. Period. You're going to pick Will Smith, and that's the problem. Is that's when we get shoved into these little indie roles that maybe not ever see the light of day, and they're really good movies. You have really good teams, really good cinematographers, and I know some really talented writers that just can't even get a script sold because they have the producers and executive producers. They have piles and piles of scripts from people who are already established and well known. So it's like this catch 22. It's like this never ending cycle. And what do you do? I think that's why many people turn to YouTube, or, Instagram has helped people
yeah,
start to get a fan base or a following. To me, it just seems like it's been that way since the golden age of Hollywood, with people getting contracted into the studios and they were just doing picture after picture after picture. And, where does someone like me pop in there? Where does a newbie pop in there, because you are green. Where do you get your experience? Well, you get it in a student film. Well, if you only do student films, no one takes you seriously. So it's such a hard business. I don't really wish it for anyone, but some people get really lucky, and you can have fun doing these independent films, and make a little bit of money or no money at all and meet some great people.
yeah.
So
Sometimes it gets to a point where it's like if I ever do like a big time studio picture, it's like it's definitely for the paycheck. But sometimes it's like
yeah.
it's definitely for the paycheck. I won't bullshit about that. It's definitely about, hey, oh, they're offering me 300,000 per for a role. I'm like, 300 grand. Okay, that could get that, that pays off a couple of things, but
Well, you see a lot of people do that. It seems like a lot of big actors are doing it for the paycheck because the movie ends up being really flat and their characters are really flat and it's not going anywhere. Like I was a stand-in on Dead Ant, or not Dead Ant, I was in Dead Ant on Ant-Man. I was a stand-in and for Evangeline Lilly, and I was talking with Michael's character, and it was just him on the day that we were filming. It was just him. So he's basically this talking head. No one's around him. It's all green screen essentially, and no one's acting with him. He doesn't have any of his co-stars acting with him, and you can see that in these big movies like Avengers. You can just feel it. There's like nothing. There's no play. There's no emotion. It's just like, I'm Captain America and we're gonna save the day. Oh, I'm this and we're gonna, and it's just like these like talking heads that really don't feel like I'm watching anything. Like I watched His House last night. It's a horror film, kind of a psychological thriller.
hmm.
It is worth watching, but the acting was something that was so pure, that felt so real and so simple and so honest. And I'm really glad that it's on Netflix, so it's easy access
Oh,
to watch.
okay.
So many layers to it and so many different elements to each character, and that's what I love. But I mean, who knows how much money they made? They probably made a good paycheck, but some of these big ones, it just feels like it's just all about money and not about the craft, and it can get
I,
frustrating. I think even Martin Scorsese made a comment about that. Like he was,
yeah, Martin Scorsese has been a very big deflector of I want to say studio films, but more like along the lines of comic book. Well, when I think of comic book movies, they're very formulaic, and it gets whereas like a lot of this stuff looks good, especially take a recent example. Like today, Disney just released their Cruella de Vil, teaser. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, this is basically their version of the Joker. And I'm like,
mm,
it's literally the same beat for beat for beat. Whereas it's like we all know what's going to happen with Cruella de Vil. Her name is Cruella de Vil. It's like you don't need well, like an origin story for a person named that.
mhm. I
It,
should look into it. I didn't know that was out yet. I'll look at it.
yeah, and it looks good. It looks good, but it's like you kind of feel like you know what's going to happen by looking at the trailer. But
Yeah.
uh, and since you mentioned horror movies, I will talk about it in a couple of moments. But it's weird how like nowadays there are trailers now that are that they're trying to like do new movies and all that stuff, and sometimes the trailers they make it good, but when you watch the movie, it's like it's
Mhm.
very standard by the books formula, all that stuff. It's like it doesn't really
Yeah.
bring new to the table, and whatever that new to the table is like somehow it's like oh wow, it's like that person might get an Oscar nominated thing, even though it's like how it's like that like that character was so flat that it's like but okay, I kind of say it's that person acting there. It's like you give that person an Oscar nod. It's like okay, I can understand that, but the character was so flat. It's like how can that person be Oscar nominated for that role if that was like it was if it was just that role? So it's and again, it's brand
It
rec.
feels like a little game, huh? That we're not like privy to the instructions or something. It's like the rules are unbeknownst to us because it just seems like I don't want to say that for all films. Like for me, I think the Joker was very monumental. I think it was
Yeah,
beautifully shot, beautifully executed. The character work, the costumes, the lighting, everything just really flowed, and it was just really deep. And but there are some other films where I watch them and I think I've done some small budget indie films that I think are just as good, but they'll never be seen. And I really feel like you said, just like where did it go? It's super flat. I think, like I said, I think it's like this game of just these big time names. It feels rigged to me. It just always feels rigged. I think a lot of people feel this way, and I think that's why they're making such a fuss about it, making it more multiculturally diverse. And when they threw in Parasite last year, it was like, okay, did you really just throw it in, or did you really honestly want it there? Like it was really good, but was that just to please the masses just for a second? Because it just seems like it's just riddled with old white male directors. Obviously, Natalie Portman has stood up for the female directors who haven't been nominated. And it just, to me, it does feel like I'm tired of playing this game. I'm tired of
Yeah.
trying to fit in this bullshit of a mold like everyone else is and not getting anywhere. There's no art anymore. It's just a job. And
Yeah.
that's what we
And
come. We come for the art. We come for the musings. We come for the truth, the depth, the character work. And you see it. You're seeing it more now because there's more avenues for people to come out at with Hulu and Netflix and Amazon and Shudder. It's not just trying to make it to the theaters anymore. You can actually get something, out there. But
now that you mentioned Shudder, a quick thing. This is not a plug, but Shudder is a great horror related streaming service. You get to watch a lot of stuff on there. So yeah, but to close this point before we go switch this topic to horror, it's sort of like what the Scorsese just said before. Is like a lot more things. Is like it's no one really cares about the art of the film anymore. It's like it's more along the lines of it being too saturated with formula, and the more people are more used to that, it's more or less okay with people because people seem to like everything being the same as it was. But if it's like something injected something, as long as they inject something new to that formula, you know. I don't want to go into a big thing, but Star Wars is a very big thing. It's like people really don't like it when they try and inject something new. They rather have something new, like something new with something old. But when they don't
yeah,
like that, and then Disney's like, okay, what can we do? It's like, okay, we'll do a little TV show about a side character name, a character they never heard of, and then suddenly that's what everybody loves. And then when there's like, can we get that onto film now? It's like it's definitely one of those things where it's like like it's weird because I think there are studios who are trying to listen to their fans, but at the same time, producers are the ones who essentially be like, "Nah, I'm like we could listen to fans another time. We need to sell this movie." And and that's where it like essentially boils down to is essentially selling this movie. And like you said before, it's like
yeah.
there are great independent movies, but sometimes these independent movies are not sold to the masses and just like quietly released like to 20 theaters or maybe even 100 theaters, something like that. And then people don't really see this because, it's like it was quietly released because it's a small independent movie.
Yeah, well, I also think there's so much content out there too that everything's just utterly
That
forgettable
too.
anymore.
It's like it, it trying to watch a Netflix TV series is hard because one, they seem to have added like almost like an extra 20 minutes to everything to where it's like now it's like people are just like if this was like a few years ago, I'd be just so used to like, oh, okay, it's an hour show, just sit back, relax, and by the time it's like the end of the day, I'm practically done with the episode. But now, I mean, not episode, the season or the show, I should say. And then now it's just like I could only watch like maybe 2 or 3 episodes of these Netflix shows before I go, okay, I'm done now. Well, what else can I do? And but yeah,
That's why I really like watching old movies. Like I'm into like just older movies. I know some of them are very formula as well, but I do like a lot of the 90s films or even 1950s films. Like I like to go back because I feel like there was something else involved with it. It doesn't feel rushed. It doesn't feel like they're playing down to me. Like all these new movies that are just narrated to. I'm like, I don't need a narrator. I don't want to be narrated to. I want to see it and explore and move with the story myself. Stop fucking narrating to me. Like so many movies are doing that now too. And that bothers me. And I think like the new It movies were like, I just I just don't know what I was looking at, like a magazine. You know what I mean? I felt like I was just being fed garbage. The same with Aquaman. Like I was just like, what is this? How fast did you turn this around? And it doesn't matter. I'm not trying to like diss anyone's work because I
oh
really
no,
do admire everyone. I think everyone works really hard. Obviously, there's a lot of people involved that go into making a movie. Period. Like, so you have to respect that. I really don't know how big movies are made. If it is up to the producers or what, I don't think people are listening to the fans. A lot of times, it does come down to money. It does
yeah,
come down to actors' time. Because a lot of times, the actors are like, "Hey, I'm $5 million. You get me for 3 hours." And then you're like, oh shit, you know, we got to make this picture and we got to put it together. And we only have 3 hours with her. Like, bring her in quickly. And it's just like, you know, and I've had that in my films. Like, there are some actors that show up and we get like literally 30 minutes with them. And I can't even act with them. I'm like, okay, they're doing it, and you just put me in later. Like, it's a money, it's a numbers game, it's a money game, and that's what it feels like it is. It's who can bring in the most money, what's going to get us the most money, how can we do it in the least amount of time, where can we skimp on money, you know, and then I think it affects the overall picture, and that's
Yeah, it
why
does.
it does. And then it bothers me when people think that like small budgeted like independent films, sometimes they're successful if there's a right name attached, but they get overlooked because there's not a big name in it, or the money wasn't big, or it didn't go here, here, here. And people start to like put a label or judge these things without really giving them time or honoring people's time that they put into it.
Yeah,
And like,
a great example of an independent movie being successful is a horror movie, which is how John Carpenter's Halloween. John Carpenter's
mm,
Halloween, you know, at the time, Jamie Lee Curtis wasn't a big star. John Carpenter wasn't a big star in terms of directing. You know, he had essentially a no-name cast. No one really knew who this guy was, and then suddenly, this movie just essentially springboarded into essentially not only launching his career, but also Jamie Lee Curtis' career and also everyone else.
mm,
So it definitely helps sometimes when there is a small independent movie that essentially springboards the same thing. Like Paranormal Activity. I remember like
right.
10 years ago when when the first movie came out, I was like, I watched it, I was like, okay, it's a found footage movie. And I'm like, I really don't like the found footage aspect, but watching this, it was like, okay, maybe they have something there. And then,
Mm,
you know, after the third or fourth movie, after the third movie, you know, it has the whole notion of, you know, becoming too like they lose the okay. This is a little gray for me, but especially with a horror series, and this is the horror me. This is the horror fan coming out. It's like when you try and do a movie that's like a franchise, and by the third, fourth movie, you start adding lore to it, and sometimes the lore works, but sometimes it doesn't really work because you know less about the villain, the more scary the villain is. Like that's
mm,
Michael Myers was so scary without you knowing him. In one franchise, he was the brother of Laurie Strode. Freddy Krueger, you don't know why he was burned aside from, oh, he killed a couple of children and the parents did all that, you know. Jason Voorhees, he's scary because, you know, he's the, you know, a lost, his mother, so forth and so on. But there are, again, I don't want to go into a whole diverse
mm,
tangent because once there's a horror series that goes in like past like four movies or so, or maybe past three movies, they start adding more and more to the lore, and it's like sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work.
mm,
Sometimes it's like less is better. But speaking
right.
of horror movies, this is a this is a great divergent. It's like finally I have something to actually talk about horror movies.
Horror movies, yay.
As my background cannot be so.
Yeah. Mhm.
uh, so how did you get into okay, first question, were you a big fan of horror movies growing up, or was that something that you kind of like just hopped on to growing into the notion of later in life? It was like, okay, I could work in a horror movie, that sort of thing.
I love horror movies. They're one of my favorite genres, to be honest. Like when I was, I think 5, I was watching Child's Play and, you know, afraid of Chucky and, you know, the clown, what it was called It, wasn't it? The
Yeah,
original.
Pennywise.
Yeah, that was one of the earlier films I saw too when I was still a kid. Like, you know, I shouldn't be watching these things, but I did. And I really, I don't know, same reason I like tattoos. I just feel like something. So when I'm watching horror movies, you get that adrenaline rush and you're afraid. And then like it sticks with you too. So you're like afraid to go down in the basement and you're afraid to go in your closet. And it just like adds this fear and it's so ridiculous. Not anymore now that I'm an actor and I understand more metaphysics and physics and acting, I don't, I'm not as afraid anymore. But I loved that fear. I was really loved possession movies,
Yeah.
like The Exorcist and Exorcism of Emily Rose and The Rite and The Devil Inside. Like I love those kind of films. They're just really fun for me to watch, and they're the easiest to book if you're willing to get naked. And I'm willing to get naked because to me it's just a body, and I'm not ashamed of my body, so I get naked, and that's what got me the roles. So essentially, I think that's kind of where maybe I got a little held in that stigma as well. It's like she's a naked girl in horror movies, but at the same time, that's kind of a segue to get into acting. If you're cool with being an actor, you're like this blank slate, like you're able to do everything that the role requires you to do, you'll get hired. But that's kind of what I think projected me into acting in horror films, was the fact that I was willing to show my tits. But honestly, I still love them. I love being covered in blood. It's kind of shitty, but it's fun. I love the prosthetics. Like I love working with practical effects. To me, I think it's more fun. There's always something new on set. There's always something exciting. I've always had fun doing horror more than any other film.
Yeah, speaking of blood and prosthetics, I do remember that there are several characters in your horror lineage, like horror filmography, where they do die. I don't want to say gruesome death, but at least gruesome in the sake of what the MPAA can allow, or they could show on film. I do remember in Silent Night, your character, like ends up essentially hiding in a what was it? A
I
wood.
get I get thrown in the wood chipper.
Yeah, you get thrown in the woodchucker, and I'm like, I'm watching. I'm like, okay, I can see how this could be like hard to do on a film, but I'm pretty like, oh, it's like that you just shot like maybe like they just like I was just like outside one thing and another camera is just like showing all this stuff being spewed. In terms of like when your character has to die and all that stuff, what is the process of essentially okay, uh, it's like I love being on this film, but now it's like now my character has to die in a very gruesome hard death. Like what is the process of essentially as a horror actor to go through all that stuff, especially even if it's just a small role where it's just like, oh, I'm just like cop two and cop two gets shot in the head and or
Mhm.
three gets like stabbed in the throat or something like that.
You just kind of you make do with what you have, like in your imaginary circumstances, and you just make it real. If there's like a crime scene or something, you have to earn your death. So basically, if you have a more meatier part, you build up to it to like earn that death. It's not so like so that the audience can feel it with you and be like, oh wow, she's dying. This is horrible. Like, and they can
Yeah.
emote with you and feel it and like really honor that moment with you. But if it's something quick like Silent Night where you don't really get to know my character, I'm sort of like this junkie on a bed doing nude photography and then I run from deranged Santa Claus. It's you have to just, make that fight for survival really instinctive and true and honest. And that's what also makes it fun too, because we always, as humans, dapple with the idea of us dying at any moment, at any time. And a lot of people are afraid of death. And so when you're embodying that as an actor or a character in the scene, it's frightening. Your adrenaline spikes, you're super afraid. Your fight or flight is going and you're just like, what can I do? And you have to make that real in these imaginative circumstances. So, even if you're just cop number two that's getting shot, it's real for you. Because
Yeah.
honestly, I'm someone that really does bond, not bond necessarily, but watch the extras in a film. Like the background really does make the scene. And if a background member is just phoning it in or being ridiculous in the background, it ruins it for me. I can see it and I get taken out and I'm like, I probably even know that person. And so, yeah, I mean, for a death, you really have to just embody what it feels like to fight for your life, because your life is something that you would fight for in reality. So how would you fight for it as your character? And they're really fun. They are fun to do because you're dealing with something that's very real that could happen, that someone might actually be going through too. I
And
mean, there
then
are serial killers out there, so someone could be, put up on antlers. Hopefully not, but
and then there are like horror movies where it's like, oh, it's like my one of my friends suggested me to watch like years ago the movie Zombievers, and I was like, and there are movies like, and there's a movie where it's like, oh, you're being attacked by a zombie beaver. I'm like, okay, this could happen, maybe. I'm not sure. Like,
well, yeah. Didn't someone recently get like their arm bit off by a beaver? I think it was like right after our movie came out. There was someone in Canada that was fishing or doing something with their kayak or something, and a beaver attacked him. It's like now it's not a like fear of zombie beavers is actually like real. You could be like afraid of freaking beavers. Don't be afraid of
yeah.
beavers. Love them, people.
Oh yeah. They're just territorial, so I,
Yeah.
all animals are just territorial in that aspect. But yeah, it's definitely, unless your character is uh, a villain or just an asshole character, people are like, I don't know, this character this bites it. But if it's a character that's like maybe one and done, where it's just like they only have like maybe a couple of lines, you're like,
Mhm.
and they're kind of like just kills for the sake of, you know they need a body count to be, you know and that has been, a notion of horror movies, is that, oh, sometimes it's like, this movie is like maybe 80 minutes long, but we could make another extra 10 minutes of just adding an extra two bodies, just to make sure there's like, oh, we have, more bodies to count, all that stuff. So horror movies are, it's hard to understand sometimes. It's like sometimes it's like, there's horror movies are there just to get for the body count, and then like that one and done people, whereas it's like, oh, it's like this character is like very, like, you kind of want to know more of that character, and then suddenly they're gone because this killer has to be merciless or something like that. They need to have like
Right.
a rising body count, or more or less. And yeah, but as an actor, it has to be fun to essentially be, well, I wouldn't say fun, because it depends on the type of death, but also the type of the situation behind that death. Because if it's like, if your character's nude, you have to probably be nude for almost an entire day, just being soaked with blood, all that stuff. And then once you're done with,
Mhm.
they wash you off, and like, was that good? You may have to go again. And it's like, it might be in like 20-degree weather, or it might be in 40-degree weather, or something like that. And it's like,
Mhm.
sometimes the circumstances have to allow you, is like, uh, it definitely has to do, and especially if you're filming out in the woods somewhere, you know,
Mhm.
it's a lot of difficulty right there. It's like the woods is,
Yeah.
it's like, try filming out in the woods while something, one,
Well, like Zombievers was very, very cold, and we were covered in. Well, I was covered in blood, so I couldn't cover up, or else I would ruin the makeup. So I'm just standing out there freezing. Everyone's behind heaters and all bundled, and of course I'm the half naked chick that has to run covered in blood. And it was like I think 30 degrees up at the Disney Ranch in Santa Clarita, California, and it was really cold. And then in Dead Ant, I'm running naked. I was running and running and running. I'm like, how many more times do I have to freaking run? Don't we have it? And it was around 110 degrees, so it was
oh
super
wow,
hot. So I've done both really, really hot and really, really cold. And I filmed in Wisconsin recently in the winter, and I did not know what winter was like until I went to Wisconsin. That winter is hell. Like, I mean, cars were buried, and thankfully my character was clothed in this movie, but my co-star, she was in this tiny little white romper covered in blood on the ground. And since I'm the only seasoned actor on the damn movie, I was like, someone needs to cover her up because she's freezing and everyone else is warm, cuddled in blankets and waiting and talking and dicking around while she's over there. Let's roll. We got to roll. And that's the thing too, is like a lot of new actors don't know how to stand up for themselves or be like, hey, my tits are out. I'm covered in blood. Let's get going. You have to sometimes take the role of like an assistant director if they're not doing their job, especially on low
Yeah.
budget movies where it can get a little, unorganized. And then,
Uh,
some bigger budget movies can be that way because everyone wants to go into overtime and make more money. So everyone's going really slow. Let me put this light up really slowly. Let me just, and you're sitting here like, I'm freezing. Like, let's get going. And if you don't have a trailer, your trailer's too far away, or, you can't cover up, you just have to make do with what's going on. And,
Yeah,
I've been in some pretty precarious situations where, your life really is at risk at that point. I mean, you don't know if you could freeze. You don't know if you're going to get heat stroke. You don't know. I mean, you don't know what you could be doing to yourself just to try to make a movie happen.
yeah. I remember there is a interesting story around the Friday the 13th Part 4. They had this scene where one of the girls is, she's laying naked in a lake. She's on the raft, and they're shooting at night. And of course, water is like freezing at anything, so she's like freezing at the same time. And Jason, the actor who played Jason at the time, he was like really upset because one, you have to do this scene where the character gets essentially impaled behind, impaled on the raft like this. So she's laying there
Mhm.
and she has to get impaled like that, and she's freezing at the same time. It's amazing how when the lead villain has to put his foot down, and the lead villain is also probably the most seasonal actor there because he's also like the probably stunt creator too. So there's that too. So it definitely feels like there is a notion of not only is the newbies, they don't know about all this. It's like, oh, it's like this role will probably require, because I've actually seen casting calls like, oh, this role requires nudity and all that stuff, and like
Mhm.
I have no roles yet that will require me to be half naked or naked at all. So it's like I'm
Mhm.
comfortable at that point yet. So why would I be comfortable at that point yet if I'm not comfortable yet? If that makes sense.
Mhm.
But yeah, it definitely feels like there needs to be more of a stance on the ground. And since you just mentioned recently filming, so yeah, I have to bring up the elephant in the room. COVID. How you doing?
Mhm.
So yeah, tell me how the experience were you don't have to go into a full on effect, but especially with this film coming out, you don't have to tell any details about that. But from a production standpoint, how has it changed compared to like a previous film?
Yeah. Um, so I filmed 3 films last year. One was right at the height of COVID, like right when it first started, so we had to shut down. So the thing with that is you're missing locations because now locations don't want to serve you essentially because of the fear of having too many people or production there. So they, now you don't have locations that you used to have. So that's a problem with that. As far as the other films, it was just like taking a COVID test every day, getting your temperature checked every day. Like everybody's in masks or face shields, and then the actors aren't because you'll mess up the makeup. So essentially, we can't put anything on. Um, but yeah, it just felt like you have less crew, so you're kind of wearing more hats, even as an actor, like in an independent film, because that's what I do mostly. You're you're also helping with costumes. You're also making sure makeup's on point. You're also, you're wearing all these different hats to make sure everything's working, or you're
Yeah,
handling your own props because props master can't handle your props for you once you've touched them. So you're having to do more things and just focus on your role. Um, and yeah, everything is just, it's more wasteful, to be honest, because now everything's packaged in your own package. So, and everything, you can't have just like a vegetable tray out and about anymore. You have to have everything individually packaged. And
yeah,
a lot of productions didn't want to do dishes or anything like that, so they had so much styrofoam. I brought my own plates and silverware, I always do. But yeah, the whole COVID thing in filming was really frustrating. One, because I was so tired of getting tested. Um, Two, like you can't hear anyone when they're wearing masks. So you're like, what did you say? Like a repeat? Because I didn't catch it. And we were in Big Bear though, so it was really nice. We were outside, so sometimes people would, if they're far enough away, would feel a little better to take their mask off, but most of the time we
Yeah.
all kept everyone kept it on just because it was cold as hell. So a lot of night shoots. But yeah, I mean, other than that, it's not terrible besides just I guess the I don't know, my co-star and I, or my photographer friend and I were laughing because he was saying like my co-star and I would have to like fake a kissing scene. He's like, I'll shoot it really wide and really far away, and you guys just pretend to kiss, and I'll just get the backs of your heads. And we were laughing, and I was just like, that's funny. But you know, once you get tested, you're obviously feeling comfortable with your co-star, so you're engaging in any activity that's necessary for
Yeah.
this story, and you're hoping that your co-star is doing every precaution that you're doing so that you feel safe. But you know, honestly, I feel like a lot of the fear around it is in your mind, and you can overcome that. You can really influence your body and the way that your body heals too, with the way that you think and the way that you behave and believe. And I think if you believe that you're going to be sick and you believe that you have a weak immune system, then that's true. But if you believe that you're a strong, powerful human, that's also true. I think you can, because our cells, we have trillions of cells that react to our thoughts every single time we have a thought. So if you're thinking negative, your cells are reacting to that. Your body will literally make you sick if you allow it to be sick, and your body will literally keep you healthy if you allow it to keep you healthy. And that's a fact. That's scientifically proven. Obviously, if you really did get, you know, a serious disease, maybe thinking it away doesn't absolutely help all the time. But what I'm saying is, if we're sitting as an actor afraid of our co-star, one, it's going to translate on screen, and two, you are going to make yourself rigid, and you're not going to keep a harmonic balance in your body, and you're going to invite sickness into your body. So
Yeah.
that's, I don't know, I just felt like just be really open and free, and protect myself, take the right precautions, take the right vitamins, and have the right mindset, and just really get into the character work, knowing and trusting that we were all tested and basically quarantined in Big Bear, because we were all tested and then brought up to this Airbnb where all of us stayed. We weren't allowed to leave. So, yeah.
Yeah, it definitely feels like it's much more of a, I don't want to say painstakingly process now, but it's much more of like a precise process where it's just like it's like what's weird is like I will be watching not films but at least TV shows that have been like like with this, like you could tell these things were like filmed like way like just like maybe a couple of months ago or something like that.
Mhm.
It's weird because like there'll be soap operas that that'll be on the TV, and I'm like, I noticed that a lot of these people will be like, they will be staying so far away that they wouldn't be like sitting so close to each other, and like I noticed like for some, and then there would be like television shows that would have at least people like not close together, but still close together to have like a notion of them being close together. They're still like maybe a couple of feet apart. They're like maybe like a foot or so apart instead of them being.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it fits the script either. You're like, what is this? What are they doing? It doesn't make sense. And you have to wonder if it is COVID related. I was thinking the same thing.
Because yeah, because like the Equalizer just like premiered on CBS a couple of weeks ago, and there's this scene where these two characters are walking down the Coney Island boardwalk, and they're like almost like a foot or so apiece from each other, and that doesn't feel like it's natural. They should be at least maybe just closer together, but because of regulations and whatnot, they may be happening like okay, like they have to be at least okay, like a foot or so together instead of being like this close together. So
Maybe, yeah, something to look
it,
into.
it definitely feels weird looking at stuff now, especially where it's just like you kind of like so used to have people being so close together, or people, and then there would be like shows where it's just like they'd like almost like a foot apart, or maybe even a whole stage apart, or a whole room apart, where it's like for some reason that's just out for some reason. But yeah, it definitely feels like maybe on the independent scene, it's like it's more painstakingly precise, whereas like maybe on a more budgeted TV show or film, it's much more like precise, but runs much more efficiently. And it just depends on the production, maybe.
Well, costs more money too. So it
Oh
depends.
yeah.
It does depend on the production because the movie that got shut down last March was we were trying to redo it, and it was just like now we have to pay all this money to have a set medic on set and have all these different rules and regulations for COVID and for testing. And they were like, we don't have the money anymore because now our budget went from here to like here because we
Yeah.
have to pay for all this stuff. And like I said, it is really wasteful. It's more costly, it's more wasteful, and and you don't know if your co-stars have done the proper, you know,
Treatment or
procedures to
procedures. Yeah.
like wash your hands after or whatever. But like I said, the fear is there too. I think we need to rise above the fear. And I don't think SAG needed to go so extreme with money, because then you're really hurting these independent films that don't have the money to buy to get a set medic and to get all these new things. I mean, you can make it work without that, I think. But that's because I've done a lot of really low budget movies, and you make it work. But I hope it changes soon. But at the same time, it's been great because, like I said, all auditions have been
Much
online
more
or
relaxed.
self-tape. So I've been able to audition more than normal because I'm in Colorado, so I don't actively pursue acting anymore unless I get offered roles, which I have 4 movies coming up, and they were all pushed to this year because of COVID, and they were all pushed to May. So I'm hoping that they're not all at the same time in May so I can do all of them, because like I said, there's 4 of them. I'd like to do all 4 and not have to choose.
Yeah, if it's gonna be pushed, like for me, it's like, yeah, chances are, depending on the like, which is odd because there are notions of me wanting to do movie. Like I want to try and film a couple of things this year, especially as a quasi filmmaker or something like that. And I'm just trying to figure out not only time placement, also can I film enough with the script that I have rather than just being like, oh, I have X amount of time, and summer's probably got to be the nicest place to do it because one, it's hot, it's also bright out. You can still film around like 7 o'clock at night and it still feel like the afternoon. So it definitely has a lot more value just film or around the summertime or during the summertime and close towards the end of summertime rather than
Mhm.
hopefully those 4 films don't come out of the blue saying, hey, all 4 things we need you to do within like, can you do 4 things? Like,
And that always seems to happen to me too. You get all these offers and they're all perfectly aligned and like one right after the other or something, and then suddenly it's all like at the same time. Um, yeah. So back in October, I had 3 films that were layered on top of each other scheduling wise, and I was like, well, I have to choose. But then one got pushed because of COVID, and another one got pushed because they were changing the script. So I was like, oh, perfect. So then I just did the one. So that worked out. But now those both pushed to May. So, like I said, at 4 pictures, I really appreciate you guys if you can separate them out so I can do all 4.
it's really the same thing with college. Is like I would remember there were times where it's like, oh, I would have like almost like 4 tests like back to back to back. I'm like, just
Oh, I know. Always.
it's like it'd be like a test or an essay or something like that, and I'm just like, I'm just like one day I'm just not doing all this stuff, and then
I know. I'm over that. Over college.
I keep on getting I keep on getting alerts. It's like, hey, do you want to go to grad school? I'm like, no, I don't want to go to grad. Maybe in 10 years, but not now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think oh wow, we talked for a while now. But we talked about a great discussion about stuff about stuff about not only what's it like being in the Hollywood scene, or rather just being in the Hollywood circuit. There we go. Uh, the notions of filming now, especially at least with your experience with the past couple of films, or at least with that stuff, and of course the notion of what it is being like being a horror actors. And it sounds like it's a very fun job, and I really do want to go into horror movies. It's just that
Mhm.
Uh, oh, I do.
Horror's great.
Huh?
Horror is great. You can do a lot with a little money and, the right prosthetics, the right special effects, and the right makeup team. You can really make horror you can do horror really well and easy. Fun. It is fun. Unless
Uh,
you are blonde and you get covered in blood because it doesn't come off your hair. Like it just stains everything.
uh, yeah, that's like the one area of the one area of film where just like I would have so much fun just being a horror director, just trying to make people less scary on set, but still trying to make people scary on set. So it's like, or it's fake. Just don't worry about it. I do have three questions left. They're very short, easy ones. One, do you have any advice to those who are watching or listening, especially if they are actors, actresses, performers, what have you, going into the performing arts field, especially now?
Hmm. Um, as far as being an actor, or just getting into directing or just filmmaking or theater in general, it does, I think, take someone who isn't fully green. So essentially, that means starting with student films and starting with like small community theater. I think that's really important and valuable. It helps you build your reel, it helps you build your credits on your resume. I think that's some place to start for sure. And getting into an acting class, because not only that, you're networking with other actors who also are screenwriters, who also are directors, or who also know so and so. So acting classes really are a valuable resource. Right now, there's a lot of classes going on, but it is via Zoom, as far as I am aware. Um, Most of it's all online right now until things start to open up again. But if you want to pursue it, I would say get creative on YouTube and Instagram and TikTok, because that's how you gain a following and that's how you can start as well.
Second question. Even though you just mentioned films that you already passed, are there any films that are in the pipeline to be released within the next couple of that are ready to be released that aren't really like they have a release date in mind?
Yeah. So two right now. Um, it would be three if we didn't get shut down. But yeah, so one of them is called 2 Cents from a Pariah, like 2 pennies, 2 cents from a pariah. That is coming out this spring. That doesn't actually have a definitive date, but it is this spring. It did get distribution. It's a really cute movie. It's a relationship between a father and daughter, and it's just sort of how they're rebuilding it. So it's actually a good movie, and I don't keep my clothes on. Actually, I do take my top off in that movie. Damn it! But also, there's Beyond Paranormal, which is coming out in April. That also got distribution. That one's going to be a really fun one. We have some good names in that film. It's a pretty exciting horror film. It's one of I'm really looking forward to it. So there might be some bloody scenes in that as well, and that's coming out in April. So keep your eye out for Beyond Paranormal and 2 Cents from a Pariah.
All right. And the last one is fairly easy. Do you have any social media that you want to plug?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Instagram. I'm at vegan_actress. Mostly acting, mostly sexy pictures, fun pictures, hiking pictures, and vegan, of course, because I'm trying to spread a message of why it's important to eat light foods and save our environment and help your body, and obviously care for our animal brothers and sisters on this planet. Um, we need to be in a homeostasis type of environment, and we're not. We're totally out of balance. So that's stuff I talk about on Instagram. You can find me on Twitter, Cortney Palm 5. I'm also on OnlyFans if you're interested. That's adult only. Don't go there if you don't want to see anything crazy. And yeah, I kind of gave up on TikTok. I don't even know what I am on TikTok, but I'm there too. I have some fun videos of my dear friends, like animals. There's this buck that I'm friends with, and I have a couple of videos of him on there. It's fun.
All right. Uh, I think anybody who does want to, I think what you just said before, and there's a good notion to end on. I think that social media is going to be a new influencing presence in the next couple of years, if not already is now. And
Yeah, it already is.
it already is. But at least if you are making stuff on Instagram or YouTube, such as myself, even though this is an interview show, just make it entertaining or at least informative.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Yeah, that was this episode. Thank you, Miss Palm, for being on the show, and
Thank you.